Andy Winter.
Faster by, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. We're delving into the world of renewable energy today, trying to pick our way through it, see what it means to us, and how the Isle of Man fits in. Lots of people have lots of opinion at the moment. Today we're hoping to get some fact from a man who has been in the industry for quite a long time, a man who has worked in the tidal and wave power industry. Now on the Isle of Man, Clive Callister is with us today. So stick around. You can text, call, email and WhatsApp in the next hour. Faster Mike, good afternoon, Clive.
Good afternoon, Andy.
So let's get straight to it. I've been asking this question all week. What is Salter's duck?
Yeah, well, Salter's duck, even I'm old enough to remember in the mid-70s, Professor Stephen Salter was a chap who had a go at tackling the oil energy crisis by trying to invent wave energy device. And I remember watching it as a young man on Tomorrow's World, these fantastic devices that bobbed up and down and harnessed wave energy. And I was fascinated by it at the time.
Seemed very plausible.
It is, absolutely.
So it works.
The idea of harnessing energy from waves is actually, in the basic form, very straightforward. The issue, as I'll explain a bit more, is that it's a very aggressive, corrosive environment, and really one of the big issues is storm survivability. It's actually very easy to design something that works in perfect conditions, but what happens is when you get into storms and the like, the energy in the sea increases many times over, 1,000 times probably, from a full storm to a flat sea, and so suddenly, as an engineer, you find the problem is you've got to design something that reacts to normal waves and gets the energy out efficiently, but also doesn't get trashed and end up on the beach the moment you have a storm. And that is the fundamental problem with wave energy.
Hence the weather we've been having in the past couple of days, which can come on us, at a few hours' notice sometimes.
Yes, and wave energy developers are really dealing with the problem of often these things are out at sea, long ways from the coast. They need to be autonomous. They need to be reliable. They need to survive those weather conditions, but they've also got to be efficient and cost effective. And that is the problem that people have been trying to solve since the 1970s.
Okay, so what's the difference between wave power and tidal power?
Okay, there's actually even more than that, Andy. There's 3 different types of tidal power. Firstly, you've got tidal lagoons, which are really where you have a man-made structure and encapsulate water and then use the sort of tidal differences to pass that water in and out. A good example recently was Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon, which never actually got built, but was a great idea on the south coast of Wales, trying to capture that and make a form of renewable energy for Wales. Then you have tidal barrages. La Rance, a river in the north of France, in Brittany, is the biggest in the world, where they, because of the natural shape of the inland waterways, they only really had to build a small barrage across the river, and then they could use the tidal flows and the run of river flows to capture the energy from that.
Is that the one near St Malo?
Yes, south of Jersey. Yes. Yeah. And that's a tidal barrage, and then you have tidal stream. And tidal stream is what we're talking about when we're thinking about the Isle of Man situation, because we don't have massive rivers that we can encapsulate, and we don't have a natural geography like sort of Strandford Loch or other areas where you can naturally, like the Rance, where you can naturally capture large volumes of water. So around the Isle of Man, we're talking about tidal stream technology.
Okay, so not lagoon, not barrage, it's got to be tidal stream. So the difference between tidal and wave?
So wave energy, obviously tidal is where you have a current, and that can be in flat water, and essentially normally used to spin sort of mini versions of wind turbines, if you like, underwater turbines, with blades that often look very like a wind turbine. Wave energy is often out at sea, where if you imagine as a wave goes up and down, there's a sort of circular motion to the particles. And what people are trying to do is harness that energy. So there's all sorts of clever ideas and designs. most commonly, they end up with a float device at the top near the surface, which sort of gets excited by the energy of the wave. And below that, you would have some form of actuator, which is usually either an electrical linear generator or a cylinder that pumps hydraulic fluid somewhere, which then spins a turbine to make the electricity. And then below all of that, you have all sorts of connections and cables, and you have some form of way of fixing it to the seabed, which could be by a big gravity concrete base or by a pile drilled into the seabed. So wave energy devices harness the energy from the waves, the moving up and down of the sea, and tidal stream is where it's sort of horizontal, linear.
Right. Does the wave energy device have to be on the surface?
No. That's where most of the energy is. So that's where historically most of the designs have been developed for. There are one or two oddballs as well, like, you have them on the coast, and where the waves hit the coast, you've had these clever ideas that have driven water columns up and down, and the air runs in and out of a turbine above it. But they're very inefficient, and a lot of mass to make a fairly small power machine. So in most cases, wave energy devices are on the surface. The issue, again, as I mentioned before, is the storm survivability. You need to get away from that situation in extreme conditions, and some of the cleverest devices now are trying to find ways to either sink and hide below the high energy waves, or to somehow open and dissipate the energy. The company I was working with, called Carnegie Wave Energy in Australia, had a very clever system of magnetically actuated hatches. So in really strong conditions, these hatches would open and essentially release the energy and let the energy flow through these devices rather than getting ripped out of the seabed. And that is, as I said before, fundamentally the biggest problem.
So essentially feathering the device so that the energy went through it.
Absolutely, like a wind turbine where you turn the blades.
Okay, let's get to the phones then. David's first with us today. Hi, David. You're live with Clive Callister.
Hello, Clive. I just wondered whether you could shed an opinion on Ørsted want to build 80 to 100 wind turbines off the East Coast, and they should be up and running if they get going in 2025 by 2030. And yet the Manx government wants to spend millions and millions of pounds building onshore. Now, if you build onshore and a blade or a turbine fails, I can't see a company coming back to the Isle of Man with a massive crane and all the planted labour, downtime in that resource for a month to come to the Isle of Man to fix one blade. And I'm just wondering, if it was you had the shout, would you go for wind onshore or offshore, or a combination of both?
So, David, there's a couple of questions there, isn't there? So, firstly, to answer your question actually about the blade failure, I was involved in the wind industry, onshore wind industry. It's very rare to have full blade failures on modern wind turbines. They're very well made. But also, most owners of wind farms have long-term maintenance contracts with the turbine manufacturers. So it would be their responsibility to come back and change the blade if there was a failure. The technology for getting large blades to sites is actually very clever nowadays as well, with all these machines that can move them and lift them up in the air and spin them around. It's not as difficult as people think. As for offshore or versus onshore, realistically, onshore is deliverable for the Isle of Man much faster, and if we all believe in this climate emergency that they're talking about, onshore is quicker, onshore is cheaper, but obviously the offshore wind farm is a much larger scale and would give the Isle of Man much more opportunities to be completely green further down the road.
Okay. A final word, David?
Yeah, if this maintenance program or replacement of a turbine or a blade requires bringing that massive crane back to the Isle of Man, I can't see the company doing it for one off blade or a turbine.
So there's actually some clever technology now as well, where you can have sort of mini cranes that erect, and alongside these machines, there's millions and millions of turbines around the world. There is ways of doing this, and there are lots of more obscure locations than the hills in the Isle of Man. Honestly, David, it is very doable.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that, David. I appreciate that point. And again, I was chatting before with Clive and just saying that the punter, if you like, the customer, the person in the street, is at the moment stuck between, if you like, government policy. We've got the green lobby. We've got business trying to turn a penny as well. So the question I'm going to ask you, Clive, is how mature is this technology and how mature is the market? Is it settled yet?
So if we take wave energy first, the answer is it isn't at all. There's only ever been around Europe 12.7 megawatts of ocean energy installed in the sea, and of that, 12.3 has been taken back out because essentially it's finished or failed, and so it's still a pre-commercial technology. So realistically, unfortunately, you can't today. The Isle of Man government could not go and buy wave energy devices. Tidal, in those locations where you have that fantastic geography, with large areas of water you can encapsulate, like in northern France, then that's easily done. Tidal stream around the Isle of Man, again, you could not today go out and buy a tidal stream generator off the shelf. There's some close to commercialisation now, and the UK government has recently awarded some contracts for difference for 189 megawatts per 189 pounds per megawatt hour, which is about 18.9p a unit to supply the electricity. Yeah. Those things might get built soon, but they are in also areas where the tidal currents are much higher than the Isle of Man. Yeah. So between the Orkneys and the and Pentland Firth, where they're getting 8-9 knots of tidal stream, the Isle of Man we don't see that.
Anecdotally, we hear of people say, off the Point of Ayre there's a heck of a tidal current there, or down by Kitterland off the west coast. Are we genuinely not in the game, or are we not in the game until the technology comes towards us?
The latter. Yes. If you look at the energy in sort of a 3-knot current, a 5-knot current would be about 5 times as much energy, and a 10-knot current would be about 37 times more energy. And at the moment, the turbines that are being built and our test pre-demonstration projects are really being put in those areas that have got the really high energy. So we had one in Strandford Lock for 12 years from CGen. That's been taken out now. They say the Pentland Firth is much higher tidal streams than we've got. So unfortunately, the Isle of Man will one day have tidal energy, but not today.
So what was the situation with the Strandford Lock one, if that's gone now?
That's gone, yeah. To be honest, I think they got all of the science out of it they could. It was very expensive to maintain. So they took it out. I think it was 12 years old.
Talking about expense, then, what's a ballpark figure for a tidal energy structure?
So who knows? Because there isn't a commercial one that you can go and buy.
I mean, you saw some in Western Australia, didn't you?
Yeah, wave energy down there. Yes, but I've looked at the ones, and I've looked at the sort of the research grants that are given out to the ones around the UK at the moment. It's millions per megawatt out, and in fact, none of the machines yet produce that level of electricity. So we're just not at the commercial stage, Andy. It's still the development.
And this is 50 years from Salter's Duck.
Yes, I honestly, what happens is the developers of these technologies in an never-ending hunt for investment are always telling people and getting newspaper articles to say we've got the next great thing, and trying to pretend that they're pre-commercial, and if you invest now you're going to make loads of money. The truth of it is we haven't cracked that storm survivability problem, and we're probably still 10 years away more for wave energy, closer for tidal, but 10 years away for wave energy, and we were 10 years away 10 years ago.
And I think that's what the public finds confusing, in that we often see, as you say, the letters in the press and the big articles or the documentaries that come out. That's obvious. Is that genuinely, that's somebody trying to float a business, literally? You
need investment, don't you? These are very expensive things to design and develop. Wave tank time,
millions,
ocean,
tens
and tens of millions, and you need investors. You get what you can from government grants and green schemes, but you need every source of investment you can. And again, the company I was involved in probably put more effort into trying to raise money than it did into actually building the things and testing them.
Any geographic impetus in this? Is this big in Asia? Is it big in South America, North America? Any centre of excellence?
So historically, Europe and Portugal and around the UK has been, but like a lot of things, China has suddenly woken up to the game, and they are almost, they're chucking state money at it, and they're rushing straight past some of the development phases into trying to build at the moment some pretty large devices. Yeah. But they've got massive energy problems, and they've rushed into the wind business as well. So they see a massive opportunity. Ocean energy is predicted to be a £300 billion industry in 15 years' time. So it's enormous potential.
Okay, Julian, you're live with Clive Callister.
Hi, Andy, and hello, Clive.
Hi, Julian.
Hiya. I do have a question about tidal stream power, but I just wanted a quick 1-minute take on yesterday's news that Ørsted has fired both its chief operating officer and its chief financial officer as its losses have gone over 5 billion. And also, Ørsted apparently are pulling out of the offshore wind business in Norway. They're pulling out of New Jersey. And that, in turn, yesterday caused Moody's to further downgrade Ørsted along with Fitch and the S&P 500. Just wondering your take on it. Do you think that this is an indictment of the wind energy industry? Because it's kind of looking a bit precarious now.
I'm a big fan of the wind energy industry, Julian. I think it's essential. I think Ørsted's problems, I didn't read the newspaper yesterday, to be honest, I was busy, but I think that their problems for quite some time have been, there's been a fantastic rush to try and sign up projects and to develop in all sorts of areas. And what we're seeing with all this development and all the problems around the world is a shortage of materials, a shortage of technology, a shortage of vessels to put all these things in place, shortage of cabling. So I don't know whether it's also symptomatic of actually them sort of being more selective now and picking the better projects, and that sends a message to the markets.
Is Ørsted the biggest company in the business?
It's certainly one of them, yes. I mean, who knows about the Chinese companies, but it's got to be right up there.
Julian?
I know also that Equinor, the other big player, they've just written down losses of 840 million on their New York wind farm as well. So I don't know, it's not looking too good. I'll quickly go to my main point. Your talk about tidal stream power. I know that one of the biggest problems with the CGen tidal turbine at Strangford Lough, they were forced to put a mammal detector on for detection of seals. And basically, there were so many of the things around that they ended up shutting it down more than it was running, which was one of the major problems with it. And I think they also had major problems with difficulty with servicing, subsea mechanical noise and leakage of lubricants. And also the tidal stream was ripping apart the cable, because, of course, you've got to connect it to a cable to land. So and I understand that the largest tidal array in the world is in India. But that costs about £330 million, and I think it struggles to make as much as the Isle of Man does from Pulrose. So do you think there's a future in it, do you think?
You've absolutely hit one of the issues which I haven't talked about yet, which is environmental impacts. Obviously, when we get to wind turbines, everybody knows the environmental impacts around birds and habitats on the ground for the loss for the tracks and the like. But you're right. There are similar issues with seaborne devices, electrical signals and noise. They've been doing tests for years, wondering about the effects on whales and mammals and sharks, and this is all research that is still ongoing. They're still trying to understand what the impacts of putting all these devices in the sea will be. Interestingly, it seems to be personal experience that most of the time we put something in the sea, it does attract lots of marine life rather than scare it away. But obviously, yes, a spinning turbine potentially could be a hazard to a seal.
Julian?
Yeah, I quite agree with you. And I think the environment, I mean, water is 800 times thicker than air, isn't it? So this is why you get a lot of energy, but the trouble is you get a lot of wear and tear as well, and you've got saltwater erosion, and it's not a particularly favourable environment to see turbines.
It's very difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of experience in the oil sector, which the wave energy sector are trying to gather. But obviously it doesn't have the money behind it that the oil sector has in terms of solving its aggressive environment problems.
Okay, Julian, final word?
Yeah, I seem to remember Mike Profit got involved with a wave thing. It was a bit like balloons on pistons on the seabed, but I understand that all collapsed, and I think the shareholders lost all their money effectively, and I think he sold the idea off to somewhere in Australia. So I'm not quite sure how that one's going at the moment.
That is exactly the problem I'm talking about, and that is unfortunately what's happened to pretty much every wave energy company that has ever been. They have a great idea, and then they hit the storm survivability problems, and then they run out of money.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks very much.
You're painting a picture of sea power, if you like, and you use the broad brush of a wonderful idea to harness almost unlimited energy, but the problem of, as you say, storm survivability. So after 50 odd years, will anybody ever admit this is insurmountable, Clive, or is there a way through?
I've got to believe there's a way through. What it really needs is big governments, USA, EU, China, UK, to invest properly in the technology, because the potential energy is there and it's green and it's clean.
So hitherto, it's only been private.
Yes, combined with grants. There's been lots of small grant schemes around the world for different countries and different granting arrangements, but not the sort of money that it really needs.
Clive Callister is with us today. We're looking at the power of the sea, the power that's around us, and whether or not we can find our way through it as well. He knows of what he speaks, and if you want to get in touch, by all means, text, email, call, and WhatsApp on Mannin Line today.
Hey, Chico, where are you going?
I'm off to Pico's, the Mexican cantina bar.
Oh, I love Picos. You can just call in for a refreshing drink, nice cocktail, or maybe have some nibbles to share.
Or have a fantastic Mexican feast.
And when it's time to fiesta, it's the perfect venue for your party.
Open 5 days a week, Wednesday to Sunday from 5 p.m. You'll love Pico's downstairs at the Hydro on Queen's Promenade. With great choice, kids menu, takeaway service and more. See online at picosiom.com for details.
Hasta luego. See you at Pico's.
Are you concerned about your eye health? Holmes & Davidson Opticians in Douglas are proud to offer the Eidon Ultra-Wide Field Retinal Imaging and Heidelberg 4D OCT systems, state-of-the-art machines that allow early detection and management of eye diseases. Don't wait. Book your appointment today and ensure the health of your eyes with the best technology available. Call 676 230 or visit holmesanddavidsonopticians.co.uk now.
Have you been invited to take part in the Household Income and Expenditure Survey? It's one of the most important surveys for our island because the information you provide is vital data for our island's financial planning. It helps us calculate our VAT revenue from the UK. Plus, it gives us a better understanding of the financial strains on residents, so we can support those who are struggling. If you've been invited, please take part. Visit gov.im/HIES for more information.
We're all set to go for the Caroline North weekend on the Ross Revenge for November, with the greatest music from the 60s to the 90s and the return of Peter Phillips. The whole weekend is sponsored by Turton Tower Woodland Cafe, and it's all done in association with Manx Radio. Join us this weekend here at Caroline North.
Radio Caroline North. Back on 648 and 1368 AM.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Clive Callister today. We're talking about renewables, and what Andy dropped a note in 667 just to say, how proven is the technology, Clive?
It isn't. This is the point. Wave energy technology is still prototype demonstration phase. Tidal stream is also still struggling to get there. Obviously, the tidal barrage system in those places where it can be works fine, but in other places, no, it's still in the development phase. And that's the problem.
So the theory is absolutely solid.
Yes.
It's just the practicalities of doing it.
As Julian said, it's the issues around surviving those aggressive environment conditions and harnessing the energy in a cost-effective manner. And
it's funny, I've never heard, in the back of my mind when Julian mentioned it, I have heard the fact that an environmental impact subsea is made by this. How much of a one is it? Is it just the danger to the animals within the sea, or elsewhere?
So, like I suppose all environmental impact assessments, whether it's for a quarry or a wind farm or whatever, your job as the person asking for permission is to think of all the things that it might influence, and then you've got to go out and and carry out some research to prove it does or doesn't. So whether it's impact on shellfish or marine mammals or whales or long distance noising or pollution, of course, as well. That's the other problem with man-made objects. Will the materials leach pollutants into the sea, or these are all issues that you've got to prove do not have a damaging effect on the environment before you'll get permission.
Much has been made of our potential onshore and offshore wind farms, but in the back also has been mentioned the fact that Rolls-Royce make nuclear reactors for submarines, and they could be repurposed into small nuclear reactors.
Yes, absolutely. Again, not want to speak ill of Rolls-Royce, but I did have a good close look at their website about this technology, and you have to click through a good few pages before you find the comment that's hidden in there that says we hope to have these things on grid by the mid-2030s. So yes, it's a great idea in theory. I mean, if they're claiming 2030s, and then you've got to get planning permission for a site, realistically, that's a lot further down the road than that. And their one, I think, is a 470 megawatt device, much too big for the Isle of Man's power system.
Also, again, something that gets touted around, and again, we'll come to the kind of geography of it all, in that certain jurisdictions benefit greatly from hydroelectric. Norway, particularly Quebec in Canada, Quebec does very well out of hydro. Any possibilities here?
So as everybody knows, there are two small hydro turbines attached to the Sulby Reservoir. And in the middle of winter, when the reservoir's full, those things are going full chat. So producing 1.2. Probably realistically enough capacity on there to put one more in. But in the summer, when the water levels start to drop, those things are turned off. And the catchment area is only so big. So realistically, you're getting pretty much everything you can out of that hydro already. The Isle of Man, unfortunately, does not have the large catchment areas and the miles of head above the turbines as well. So you just don't have the capacity and the capability and the energy to harness in the Isle of Man situation.
So at the moment, when it's throwing it down for the past month, it's been okay, but otherwise, and of course, there's no low-level lake that we could pump back up to Sulby, is there?
Yeah, sort of battery storage hydro is a different thing altogether. I mean, that is obviously a technology which some people have been suggesting would be a great idea for the Isle of Man because that then allows you to have a lot of renewables and a lot of intermittent energy from the likes of wind, and to store that energy by pumping the water back uphill. There are also people now looking at higher density liquids, so that actually they might work more in an Isle of Man environment. So you have
what's a higher density liquid?
Well, you might have, if you imagine something almost with like grains of iron in it or something like that, or so it flows, but it's much heavier.
Oh, I see.
And therefore you don't need so much height. There's again nothing commercial yet, but there are people doing science projects on it.
In your experience, obviously, as a Manxman, what do you think is the best fit for the Isle of Man?
So for me, I don't think there's any choice but to have onshore wind in the short term. I appreciate the landscape and visual impacts that will have, and if people are proposing them close to where you live, I can imagine you're pretty upset about that. But realistically, if wave energy and tidal energy comes along the road in 10, 20 years' time, or even nuclear, or, heaven forbid, nuclear fission, fantastic. But in the short term, I'm afraid onshore wind first. That's proven. That, there's almost a terawatt of wind now installed around the world. It's proven, it's safe, it's cheap. And it's easy, to be honest.
Solar and geothermal for the Isle of Man. Solar first.
So solar fits as well to some extent, because obviously when it's nice and sunny and in the summer and perhaps the wind isn't blowing, solar works. So solar is definitely there in the energy mix. It's a shame we're not a few hundred miles further south, and it would be even better. But solar is definitely better than nothing. Geothermal, I've answered this question before. All the studies suggest that geothermal in the Isle of Man isn't going to work. We do not have the radioactive decaying granite rocks that they have down in Cornwall. The UK government did a big study into this for about 15 years in the 80s and 90s and concluded that actually there were very few locations in the UK. There is the United Downs Deep Geothermal Project down in Cornwall, which is a demonstration project again, so it's not commercial. And they are having to drill down sort of 5 kilometres for injection well and another 2 for the other well. So and they've had over £45 million worth of investment already. So geothermal, unfortunately, I don't think will work in the Isle of Man.
Do you think it's worth a punt? I mean, obviously, whenever we talk about this is millions and millions, tens of millions of pounds getting to the stage where something might work.
Well, why? I mean, that's a strange decision, isn't it? You're sitting there thinking, well, I could have a £45 million punt on a geothermal well, or I can build a 20 megawatt wind farm for 30 million, which I know full well will work and give me a decent amount of electricity. You're a brave man to go the geothermal route.
Everything's going to come down to money in the end. Now, you mentioned the fact that governments have to allocate funds to this. And as you say, hitherto it's only been arm's length sort of grants and what have you. And it's come from... and inevitably, whenever commerce and industry gets involved, Clive, it's incumbent on commerce and industry to get a return on investment and to satisfy their shareholders. So are we getting this base about Apex? Should this be government-led, or is it necessary that industry is involved?
So with industry, you're right. I mean, the wave energy industry, for example, and Tidal, each of those companies is working for its investors, and it's trying to not only develop a device that works, but it's trying to identify what intellectual property it can have, what patents it can list to protect its inventions from other people. So naturally, there isn't a massive amount of sharing in the industry. It's a kind of competition where when people turn up to these industry events, they all sort of nosy at each other, wondering what's going on, but don't really want to give too much of their own secrets away. So yes, it needs a lot more investment, and it needs governments to get universities and research information going where the people in those situations will share their research and their learning much more readily.
Do you make any political judgment about this? Because politics is interwoven in this. It's kind of immutable. It's all the way through.
Desperately try and avoid that. But I am the energy advisor to the Climate Change Committee, and I'm lobbying for onshore wind. It is the obvious choice. I unfortunately feel sorry for the people who live close to where it's likely to be put, but I would happily have them on the hills above my house.
So what's the reason why you think it's the obvious choice?
Because it's proven technology, because it works, it's relatively cheap for the electricity you get out of it, and particularly if government does it itself, because you're not then paying for the private investors' profit. I know there are concerns about government doing any projects themselves at the moment, but building wind farms is actually pretty straightforward. It's a concrete base with some cabling to a substation somewhere, and the turbine manufacturer comes along and puts up each turbine probably in about 2 or 3 days.
And the question of base load?
That's the problem, isn't it? You're always going to have base load. But, we've got a climate emergency. Base load at the moment is pumping all sorts of pollution into the atmosphere, and the unseen damage to the birds and the environment and all the rest of it is much greater than wind turbines. So if we can have an awful lot of renewables backed up with traditional generation, then to me that is the short-term solution.
20-1 on Mannin Line today. We're talking with Clive Callister about renewables.
Oh, what's this? Hospice Isle of Man are once again giving you the chance to win a car this Christmas. And tickets are just £25. Even I can't be that generous. Ho, ho, ho. With the Hospice Christmas card draw, you can win an automatic hybrid Renault Captur E-Tech. But hurry, as the draw will take place on the 29th of December. Get your ticket now at hospice.org.im/card draw, all hospice shops, or call 672222. Brought to you by Hospice in partnership with Altitude.
There's only one thing better than Everest double glazing, and that's their triple glazing. That's because their most thermal efficient windows work by keeping heat inside, helping reduce heating bills. And because we all need some energy efficient help right now, Everest are upgrading their new double glazing customers to triple glazing for free. Everest can't stop energy prices going through the roof, but they can through their windows. Minimum purchase and restrictions apply. See website for T's and C's.
Deck the halls with boughs of holly and much more when you visit Watson's Nurseries this Christmas. Watson's Nurseries for cut and potted Christmas trees including non-drop at great prices, along with decorative festive wreaths and superb gift ideas like trees, fruit trees, large specimen trees and shrubs and gift vouchers. They also stock logs and coals suitable for fires or wood-burning stoves with delivery available. Call 801 812. Find something festive at Watson's Nurseries Greba on the Peel side of Hawthorne Inn.
Ah, with EPS coatings.
Your house could be looking as good as the day it was painted for 10 years. Guaranteed.
Whatever the Manx weather brings. The revolutionary Protect system from EPS Coatings. Ultimate protection for your home. Guaranteed for 10 years. Book now for next spring and get 10% off. Search EPS Coatings Isle of Man and keep your house beautiful for longer with EPS.
Port Erin resident James Fenton is 101 years old. At the age of 20, he enlisted into the British Army, and after basic training, Bombardier James Fenton of the Royal Artillery was sent to fight with the 14th Army in the steamy jungles of Burma.
We had to be very aware of cholera and insect bites. Malaria was another thing. We were shelled every night without fail.
Hear James Fenton's amazing story as part of Manx Radio's Remembrance for 2023 at 6 o'clock this evening, or again as a longer podcast after the show at manxradio.com.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Clive Callister's on today. I've got a message in from Graham Foxhume, who has been on Mannin Line quite a few times. And Graham, Graham is a big geothermal advocate as well. Graham just says that the granite is beneath us and very low ongoing costs. Obviously, it costs a fortune to get the thing going, but low ongoing costs. Now, if you want, there's actually a meeting tomorrow night as a public meeting talking about onshore and offshore wind farms at the Station Hotel in Port St Mary in Station Road, 7 till 10. It's a presentation of potential practical, financial and legal issues with on and offshore wind farms as well, and a discussion about the proposed geothermal alternative. And Graham's going to be there, as well as Julian and former MHK Peter Carron. So if you want to go and have your say there and find out more, then by all means, Station Hotel, Port St Mary tomorrow. And next week, Ørsted have got a week of community information drop-ins. Their offshore wind farm, the people who are bidding to put the wind farm offshore on the Manx seabed, and they've got some drop-in sessions on Monday. It's at the Laxey Pavilion, Tuesday Milltown House in Ramsey, Wednesday at Peel Football Club, Thursday it's at the Erin Arts Centre, and on Saturday at the Promenade Suite in the Villa Marina. So that's tomorrow night at the Station Hotel in Port St Mary, or next week throughout the Isle of Man, just to find out more. Kiri's on now. Hi, Kiri.
Hi, how are you?
You're live with Clive Callister, Kiri.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's going to be a quick call. I'm very interested in the governance and due process to do with the wind farm at Eristane. So I shall start by declaring that I'm a resident and also a local commissioner. Do the Mannin Line. Clive Callister declare his interest. For example, he has just said that he's on the Climate Change Board, and he was appointed by a political body. But I haven't heard him declare that he's also the managing director of COLAS. And COLAS holds the licence for the quarry at Eristane. He's also the MD of Alden Construction and the COO of Renewable Energy Holdings. So the question I've got for Clive is, has he declared his interest and his connection to Alf Cannon during this process?
Hi, Kiri. Yes, absolutely. I wrote a summary of my career, and I was actually interviewed by the then chief executive of DEFA and Daphne Kane. I'm not sure Alfie had anything to do with it. I'm no longer the COO of REH. That company went into administration years ago. But you're right, I am managing director of COLAS, and the Eristane quarry, which is owned by government, sits on the corner of your site. Yeah, there's nothing to hide.
Well, that's all in the public domain, anyway,
Clearly.
isn't it, Kerry? So, I mean, obviously, this is a contentious issue, and particularly contentious where you're concerned. So, what's your opinion of where we are with this?
Well, I think the residents would like to see due process and everybody put their cards on the table. And I'm not sure that Alf's brother-in-law going on the public radio and saying that he's all for this site and that he's advising politically is probably the right thing to do at this point in time.
Well, it's the Isle of Man. Lots of people are related to lots of other people on the Isle of Man. We can't rule people out just because of a matter of love and marriage, can we?
Well, providing governance and declarations are made and due process is followed. But I'm not sure that the public are aware of the connections. And certainly at the beginning of this programme, you haven't declared those, which is disappointing.
Well, we have now, and nothing, I mean, everything, as you say, is in the public domain. But, I mean, if you're bothered about the governance and due process and what have you, then obviously there's an opportunity to do that. I mean, do you think there should be onshore wind on the Isle of Man? Obviously, you don't think it should be at Erie Stane, but were it to be the north, would you be for that?
That's a very leading question, isn't it? I don't want to get into that at this point in time. I feel that we should be going through this process correctly, that the environmental impact assessments and everything need to be carried out fully, correctly, not this sort of half approach that's going on at the moment.
So if it's going to happen though, Kerry, do you think we should be having offshore wind farm, that Ørsted should get the contract and put an offshore wind farm if we are to have wind power?
Well, I've read their approach to it and I've looked at all the documents that they've put out in the public domain and the way that they are engaging. And I have to say, it's an exemplary way of doing it compared to what the MUA have done. I haven't reached a decision myself on that. We've got enough to look at the moment with what's going on up here. But I will certainly be going and visiting the Ørsted public presentation and seeing what they've got to.
Okay, and don't forget that meeting tomorrow night at the Station Hotel in Port St Mary. If you can make that, Kerry.
Absolutely, and there is a Arbury and Rushen parish commissioners hosted event at the end of the month at Rushen School, where the MUA are going to be present. So I would recommend everybody get along to that as well.
Okay, Kerry, you're welcome anytime to come on Mannin Line and give your opinion. Thanks for being with us today. And Eddie's on now. Hi, Eddie.
Hiya, you all right?
Good, thanks.
Good. Did you get my video I sent you?
Which one was that about, Eddie? I get lots of them.
It's one showing a bedroom of a house close to, well, not even close to a turbine.
Okay, and just, well, for people who haven't seen it, what was it about?
It was the inside of a bedroom in a house, which is on, off lights from the turbine. Shadows all the way through the house, everywhere.
And this is an onshore wind turbine, yeah?
This is an onshore.
Whereabouts was it?
I don't know, actually. I just got the video. But what I was going to say is this. If you're going to have onshore, I am only in favour of onshore, should I say, if they're stuck in deserts, nowhere near habitation whatsoever. But you've got to have the right environment for them. The Isle of Man is definitely not the place for them. We all know that they are not green, they pollute, they've got noise pollution, and like I sent that video, it's light pollution. There's nothing good about them wherever there's habitation. The other point I wanted to make is your guy on the thing there, I believe Kerry was dead right, he's very biased about everything. He actually said that he's in favour of it because it's going to be cheap and cheap is not the correct word. Nearly everywhere in the world at the moment, it's 5, 6, 7 times the electric bills have gone up. So cheap is not the right word.
Okay, all right, let me put that to Clive then. This is all about the cost of electricity and contentious as well.
Yes. Can I just go back a second, Andy, just answer the last bit of Kerry's point?
Yeah.
I'm not Mr. Cannon's brother-in-law, so I don't know where that one came from. As far as also answering Eddie's questions, first of all, if you don't mind, about what's called shadow flicker. So when the light is going on, off, on, off, on, off outside somebody's window, that is called shadow flicker in the industry. And one of the things that planning is supposed to do is model the sun moving throughout the year and making sure that people who live within a certain distance do not experience shadow flicker. And it's quite normal for turbines to be programmed to shut down. They have light sensors and measure, and they shut down if that's likely to happen. As far as noise pollution goes, again, proper noise assessments will be carried out as part of the consenting process. They will measure background noises at the local properties. They'll then model the noise and wind conditions, and they will be able to make sure that properties do not suffer from noise pollution. As for energy costs, the main question, I strongly believe that if we had a lot of onshore wind, the electricity price would come down, because if you're paying 3 or 4 per unit for all that free energy, because the wind is free, apart from obviously the capital costs and the maintenance costs, then actually, compared to the cost of gas prices and oil prices at the moment, then it can help to drive energy prices down. I accept there is a base load issue and you've got to pay for that. But if your turbine and if your gas turbine power station is sitting there off and not on because you've got an awful lot of renewables, then that's a cheap way of producing electricity.
And at the middle, I mean, again, you work for industry. You're in commerce, and I'm just interested in this triangulation of public policy, of government, of the green lobby, and of course now there seems to be only one direction of travel where this is concerned. Clive, nobody is proposing that Britain opens up coal-fired power stations or more gas-fired power stations. The word is going to be renewable in years to come. Industry has to pick up the slack where this is concerned. Industry has to find a way through, make money out of it. And of course, we live in a capitalist society. Nobody wants to work for nothing. We're not socialists or communists. So do you think industry is up to this again? Or do you think, and on the Isle of Man, we're talking about the MUA being in charge of the turbines?
Yes. Well, the MUA used to run, nothing but medium speed diesels. It managed to build a very clever AC interconnector, the biggest in the world at the time. It's built a very complicated combined cycle gas turbine power station. There's some clever guys in there with the know-how to make it happen. And as I've said before, physically building a wind farm site is actually quite easy to do. The hardest part is getting planning permission. And coming back to that question as well, talking about due process, I don't believe that the formal consultation process has started yet for Erie Stay, and I think it's about to start. So all of those residents that have concerns will have a chance to answer. The environmental impact assessment has to be done yet, and all those wintering bird studies and all those other studies I talked about will all have to happen. And then that will go to the planning authorities, and all of that will be taken in the round. The environmental impacts will be taken in the round as opposed to the benefits of renewable energy.
Yeah, and this is a government initiative. This is public policy. When 2 years ago, when the election was on, everybody talked about green issues. The top of their manifesto was green issues. So this has been voted on.
80% of the Manx population in 2019 said that onshore wind, they favoured onshore wind. And again in 2021, I think 24% said it was absolutely essential, and another 24% said it was very important.
Okay. It's been mentioned then that you're managing director of Colas, and last time you were on, we didn't get to talk about electric vehicles and the fact that you run a fleet of lorries.
Yes.
So what's the future for electric lorries? Is there a future?
Very difficult. Not until battery technologies improve.
So
is the short version.
What will trucks run on in years to come then, in the medium term?
Unfortunately, probably biofuels. There'll be more and more biofuels. If you have a lot of renewable energy, you can make more biofuels by various technologies. Maybe the battery technology will improve fast enough. Maybe hydrogen as a source of energy will come along and improve. I mentioned last time, there's very clever research going on about containing hydrogen in solids, so that it's safer and essentially lower pressure. So the honest answer is I don't know. And if you read all of the experts, what they're saying is decarbonising electricity grid is easy, decarbonising transport is going to be much harder.
So what make of the trucks you run?
We have a mixture. MAN, Scania.
I'm just wondering, what are people like Scania, what are they saying regarding motive units, electromotive? Is it going to be Scania putting money into electric vehicles?
I think all the big manufacturers are. I mean, you can go and buy an electric truck, but
up to what size?
Well, any size, but you probably only runs for a couple of hours before you need to go back and recharge the batteries.
Yeah.
And they're even experimenting with some manufacturers with battery systems that you drop out the batteries and you put more batteries in. Realistically, only governments will be running these things until the price comes down. Fuel cells is the other option, of course. I've seen lots of fuel cell buses running around, but they cost about £1 million a piece.
Clive, good to be with you today. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
We now know what Salters... Did he make any money out of it, by the way?
It was a research project, I
Professor,
think.
So he made
honestly don't know.
Not a penny out of it. It's amazing how much money's gone into tidal power and wave power, and we seem to be no further on. Clive, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for being with us today. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Open line tomorrow on Manx Radio, and this coming Friday, David Ashford, MHK, Chair of the Housing and Communities Board, who will be talking about the new Housing Association, the need for housing, supply, demand, and much more. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today. Stick around, Christie's on after 1 with 1 to 3. Well, the wind seems to have died down. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
WINT